what you have learned till now, what you learned last lesson. Yes, so we will make this revision. I will switch on my my presentation. So let's look at what we had the last lesson. You learned about enumeration type when we have some fixed set of some values. If we have fixed set of some values, we can use this enumeration type. So before our main program, we need to put type keyword to have a name of this enumeration type and the set of the values. Yes, and in our main program, we can use these values to have the variable of this type. Yes, the same type. And to make something, usually we just need to print it out, to print out some values of this fixed set. And we can use these functions to access the previous element of the current or to have the next element. Yes, suck and pred functions. But it's just for you to see how can we use this enumeration type. But the most important thing, the most important topic, what we discussed about what we have had discussion, it was the arrays. Arrays, it's a really important topic, and in every programming languages we have this type of array. And we had some examples here. So we can declare the array. So if we have some set of numbers, for example, we can use them as an array. So array is a set of some type of elements, and they have indexes. So the array is usually in PascalABC.NET is usually zero indexed. It means that the first element of this array is always zero, starts at zero. Yes, and then it is just increased by one, increases by one. So the second will be one, the third will be two, and so on. And if we have this type of declaration, we have 5 lines of the code here. Yes, the first line is declaration of an array, so definition of an array. So we must put here var keyword. It means that we have allocated memory for this array. And we must say that this array will be of integer type. It means that it will have some elements of integer type, some numbers inside it. Yes. And then in the second line, we must say that it will be a new array of integer type, and it will have 3 elements, only 3 of them. And the next 3 lines, we initialize these elements of the array with some numbers. So the element with 0 index has 5 number, the element with 1 index has 2 number, and the element with 2 index has 3 number. We use these indexes to access, to have an access to the element, particular element. And we can use the for loop or for each loop to access these elements. But first, I would like to say that we have the short definition. So all of these 5 lines can be combined into one line. So here we have the same, it is the same what we have in our 5 line, we have combined in our only one line. So we have declaration, definition, var keyword. Then we have the name of our array. We can say, we must say that it will be new array, and it will be of integer type, so it will have integer type elements. There will be 3 of them, and we initialize this array with these numbers 5, 2, and 3. And compiler adds the indexes for them just itself. So it will be 0 index, 5 number. The second, the two number will be the first index with number 1, and 3 will be index with number 2. So it is the same what we have here, yes. So you can do it long way, so just to have some of the code lines, or you can do it just using this short version. I think it is easier, yes, and maybe you will do this way because it is just one line of your code. But you can do it this way too. It's also possible because for compiler it is the same. Okay, so it's dynamic array. Dynamic array because it is only used while the memory is allocated only when we just initialize the values for this array. When we set the element to some value, the memory is allocated. But it is not allocated while we don't use this exact values. Okay, so it's first about array, what you must know and you must understand. If there is a question, do you have the questions just for this slide of our presentation? Do you have
Yeah, I have a question here. After you finish, please let me ask you, okay?
Okay. So how can we output this array? If we have some array, here we have definition and we have we have set some values for these elements, yes? So usual array of 5 integers, and we have set the values for these elements of this array, and we need to print it out. And we can use different ways to print it out. The first way, just to use println, and inside parentheses we put the name of our array. Yes, and we will see in our output window this message or this array. So it will be in square brackets. It means that it is an array. Yes, and one by one separated by commas. And we can use almost the same, but we use dot notation. So the first we must put the name of the array, then dot, and then our println method. So when we dot notation, we call it method. When we use parentheses, we call it function. So it's just a bit different for compiler. But we will see almost the same, but we will not see the square brackets, just our elements, yes, the values of our elements separated by space, just space, yes, nothing more. So you can use this way to output the elements, and even use some separator between the elements. So if you don't have here any brackets in the previous line, any parentheses, any parameter here, if you don't have, there will be just the values. But if we will put here inside these quotations, single quotations, if we will put some sign here, for example, semicolon, so your numbers will be separated by semicolon. And it's very, sometimes it's very impossible to have some separator, not only semicolon, it can be dots or it can be dashes or something else, yes. So you can put here any sign you want. And to separate your elements by this separator, or we can call it delimiter. And when we must output some element, only one element among of all our elements, only one, we are going to print out, we must access it using the index. For example, A of 2 means 5, yes, this element, and we must use this index to access this number which will be was inputted, was set to this element, yes. And we will see only this number because we asked to output only this number using index. So if we don't use the index, it means that we are going to output all the elements. But if we want to use some index, we need to put this index, some element, only one of them, we need to put the index of this element. And don't forget that we will start, we must start with 0 index. The first element has starts at 0 index. See what we have the next. And sometimes when we did something with our array and we don't need to use it anymore, but we have the continuation of our program, we need to do something else, and we need to have this memory, what was allocated by this array, we need to return it just to free it up, yes. And when we want to do it, to free the memory up, we need to put this nil. Nil means like 0. So we just return the memory which was allocated by this variable, but by this array, we just return this memory, just make it empty. To use it for our next things, what we are going to do in our program. So sometimes we need to use this nil, which means empty space. So empty space in our memory. Have I said it understandable, or maybe you don't understand it? Is it clear?
I actually don't understand it.
No, don't understand. Yes. Okay, one more time. I'll try to do it because I have some problems with my English. So if we have some variable and we use it in our program, and after some moment we don't use it anymore. So we did everything what we needed to do. But we have the continuation of our, we must do something else, yes? And we need the space memory. So the memory, we need more memory to use it in our program. So we must free this memory which was allocated by this array. We must free it up, or so to say, to return it to the memory, to return the space was allocated, to return it to the memory. Yes, and how can we do it? We can do it using this nil. Nil means that we free our memory up. So we just make it empty. What was allocated by A, we make it empty. We don't need to use it anymore for this A variable. So it's very unusual for Pascal ABC because usually we don't need to think of our memory. Because Pascal is just the programming language for teaching, for understanding some algorithm, on, but practical. We can't use it in profession. So sometimes we can use it, but it's better to use some different languages in some profession, just like programmers, real programmers. And don't think of memory. Just we have some variables, we have some arrays, and we don't need how many space in our memory, in the memory of our PC, it will it will need. But here, it is the nil, this nil constant. It is very common for C++ programming, for example. When we have C++ programming, we always must think of memory. Always we have some variable, some array. We need to think of how many memory it will take. And maybe to use some other types, not integer, for example, but short integer or byte type, just to have less memory space for our variables. And maybe it's not just not understandable for you right now, but later, when we have another programming languages, we will we will need to count the memory to understand how much of our memory, of PC memory, will be needed for this or that program. And it's just the beginning. The beginning in PascalABC.NET, we have these small tips from this big topic of using memory of PC. So if you don't understand it here, it's not a big problem, because you will not need to do it many times in Pascal, but it will be needed in some different languages. Okay, so we will just move on to our next slide. How can we output or print out the elements or do something with the elements of the array? So usually array has some elements. There may be many of them, 20, 50, or 100, or 1000, and so on. So we must use some construction or some instruction to iterate over these elements, to do something with them, yes? And usually we use two possibilities to iterate over the arrays. The first of them is we have here, it's just for loop. We know this loop, yes, for loop. And if we must iterate over our elements, we need to use the counter of the loop, I, it is here, yes, I. We need to use it to iterate over the indexes or indices of our array. So we must start with 0, because the indexes start at 0, yes? And we must do it to increase it by 1 up to a dot length. What does it mean, a dot length? You can understand it. So it is how many elements there inside our A.
Yes.
What? Yes, 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 it's how many. The number of,
But it's the same like when we put n.
Yes, the same as we put n, but n is just the number of our elements, yes. And why we have here -1? Do you understand it? -1. Why we must put
because
it here?
We start always from 0. So if we have 10 elements, we will start from 0 until 9 always.
Yes, yes. So it's always must be -1, because the length of the array, the number of the array elements, if we start from 0, so it will be till 9, but we have 10 of them, yes. Okay, so you understand it. And here just the example how to increase the values of the elements by 1. So what does it mean? A of I plus equals to 1. If we have, for example, a array, if we have there 2, 5, 6, and 1, for example, so we have 4 numbers, 4 elements of the array. And here, what we are going to do? First, we start with 0. It must be 0 index, yes. And we increase this value by 1. So A0 will set to 3, yes, because 2 plus 1 will be 3. Then we have the first, because I will be 1, the next iteration of our loop, the next repetition of our loop, yes, it will be 1. So we put it, we set it A of 1. We set it equals to 5 plus 1 will be 6. And the same next iteration. So the second element with the index number 2, it will be 6 or 7. Yes, it will be 7 because plus 1. And the last one will be 2 because we need to do it plus 1. So just this for loop has increased our elements of our loop by 1. So we can do it like this, yes. And sometimes we don't want to change the values. We don't want to change the values. We just want to put them. In this case, we can use for each loop. And we must use some variable to iterate over the values of this array. So if we have here print x, it means that we are going to have in our console window or output window, we are going to have the elements, the values of these elements, 2, 5, 6, 1. And this loop is very convenient because we don't need to know how many elements there are inside our array. We don't need to know it. We don't need to use length or to count how many elements there is inside this A. Because for each loop, just iterate over all the elements inside this array. But we must use some variable to iterate. This variable just will accept the first number 2, then it will accept 5, then it will accept 6, and then it will accept 1, and all of these numbers will be printed out. Just to iterate over the array without indexes. But here we can't change x. We can't, for example, we can't do like this. X equals to 3, for example. We can't do it. This loop doesn't allow to change the elements, to change the values of these elements. This loop doesn't allow to do it. So we can't do it like this. Just print out or maybe compare with something. We can compare. We can set here if x is greater than 0 and odd x, so we can print x. It is okay. So we can do it like this. We can use if statement, but we can't set or change the values of this variable. So just remember, if we are going to change something inside our array, we need to use for loop, just usual for loop with counter. But if we are going to have some conditions to check something and to print it out, we can use for each loop. Okay. So it's this slide. We just And do you remember that you learned last lesson how to use this generic type or function? It's just the way to declare the function for any type. So, for example, usually we need to output the array, but you know that array can be of different types. It can be of integers, or it can be of real type. So the numbers can be of different types. The elements of this array can be of different types. And to make for example, here we have the procedure to make it universal, just to be proper for any type, we must use this generic type. So this we must put procedure, then the name of this procedure, and then we have this how can we call it? I forgot. Alligator braces. Yes, alligator braces, and inside them we must put T. T means type, any type. So instead of this T, maybe integer of real type or Boolean type or something else. And here we have, again, array of T. We don't put here integer or real or Boolean or char. We don't have it. We just put T to say to compiler that it will be replaced by any type. So using this way of programming, we do this procedure universal. Just this procedure can output any types of any type, the array of any type. So it's very convenient to do it. And here we just, inside this procedure, we just print out, we have a for loop to iterate over the array. So this array will be passed in here from our main program, and it will be printed out. Yes, we have here print A of I. So just print out the elements of our array. We can do it without this loop. Yes, you know, we can do it the same, just to have print on A, and that's all. We don't need to have this for loop. It's just the same. But if we have something to check, for example, we can put here if statement or something else. Yes. So just this slide shows you how to use this generic type. We call it generic type. It means that it will be replaced by any type. So it's very convenient. And you had one task using this generic type. You had it, as I remember, it was number 2 or number 3. Okay, so this one, it's just revision of what you learned last lesson. And you to give you explanation of our next topic. And after it, we will combine, I will discuss with you, I will do with you one task, and it will be combined the array topic and this multiply layout new topic. And so now you must just listen to understand it. It's just only 2 slides there will be. And then we will do together one task. And you will understand after we do it, you will understand array also and this topic too. Okay, so first just to have some explanation why do we use this multi-file layout. It's just a professional way of programming. So if you have some task and you do it many times, for example, we need to print out the array in different tasks. So in one task you do it, in another task you do it, and always you have the same piece of code. And you can copy it and paste it in different your codes, yes, in your different codes. Just why do we do it? If we can use some different file to save this piece of code there inside this file, and just when we have our program, we can include this file just using only one line. So if we have some goals to do something and we use it many times from program to program, so we can have this piece of code inside extra file, and we can include this file just using only one line of the code. So how could we do it? How can we do it? Just look at this slide. To have this file, multi-file layout, we need to create a first unit file. We call it unit file. It has path extension. So as always every our Pascal file has path extension, yes, and this also, but usually it has some special name. The name must be meaningful. For example, here we have the name of this file, the same as it will be written inside this code of this unit. So the name of this file is din_ers. So it means that we are going to have some tasks connected with dynamic arrays. So this file must be called din_ers dot path. And when we open this file, so you will create this file, the name of this file, you will open it, it will be empty, and the first line of this file will be the name of this unit. So we must have this unit keyword, and the name of this unit. It must be the same as our file name. So the same as our file name, din_ers, and semicolon. After it, we have interface section. What does it mean? Here we will have some definitions or declarations of our procedures, functions, types, and so on. Only definitions. We don't want to put the code of the implementation of these procedures or function. So only the header of the function must be inside this interface section. So we need to put this keyword interface, and then we have the headers or definitions of our functions and procedures we are going to use in different programs. And here we have the procedure, the name of this procedure, print int r. And we have only one parameter, and we can understand that this procedure will be for printing out of the array of integer type. And then we have the definition of the function. It calls, the name of this function is array_sum, and it has one parameter, the array, and it will return the sum of the array, so it will be integer type. So it's just the example. You don't need to do it in every your unit. In each your unit you will create. It's just the example of interface section of the unit. After this interface section, we have the implementation section. So it's the most important part of this unit, because here we must take the same procedures and functions and to have the body of this function, to type the body of this function. So we have this keyword implementation. Then we need to put the goal of this procedure, just like a comment, prints integer array. So what we are going to do with this procedure? This procedure is going to print out integer array. And then we have the same header, the same as we had in interface section, yes, the same line. But after this line, we must put the code, the implementation of this procedure. So here we must output the elements of the array. And we have it here. And we use here interesting method high. It's the same as length, but we don't need to do -1. So you can use it also. And the function also, we must have this definition again, and the implementation, begin, end. And all of this code of this unit must finish with end dot. So it isn't seen it here because the screen does not allow to see it. So end dot must be put. Okay, so you must understand that if you have in your task some procedures, functions, and so on, it is better to have them in separate file. So you must create the file, you must call it to have meaningful name, and you have there the name of this unit, and you have here the interface section, where we have just definitions and definitions of our functions and procedures, and you have implementation section when you have to give the code of implementation of these procedures and functions. And in your just main program, it is another file. So you have, for example, task 01.pass. So it is the file, and you are going to use these procedures and function. How can we include it? Let's look at the next slide. So here we have the unit. Yes, it's the file din-ers file. din-ers.pass. So it's a file. We have here the name of our unit, interface section. Look here, it's here, yes, interface section. And usually we must put here the summary. It means that what this procedure is going to do. Prints integer array. And before the function we have also outputs a sum of array. So what we are going to have when we run this function. Then we have implementation part, implementation section, and then we have end. So we finish of our unit. And to use this unit, to use this file in our different files with tasks, for example, task 01.pass, we just put this line, uses din-ars. But this name must be the same as we have the name of our pass file and the same as we have the name of our unit. So they are all the same, the name of the file, the name of unit inside this file, and uses means we include this code inside our task 01 pass. And here we have only these lines. We have just the definition of some array with numbers 1 to 3. And we call the function, which is inside another file. We have it inside our unit file. Yes, we have it here, array sum. And we don't need to have it here in this task 01.pass. And by the way, we can have another file, for example, task 02 and so on, some other file. And we can include this procedure and function and this unit. Just include it, and that's all. We don't need to have always the same code. For example, to print array, we don't need to have it inside each of our tasks. We can just include this unit and to have this function run, to call this function or to call this procedure. So it's very convenient, especially when we have the professional programming, when we have some big tasks, and the tasks are usually divided by several programmers. So the manager just divide the same task. It divides between some of the programmers. He says, for example, you will do this part of this task, and you will do another part of this task, and so on. And usually they have this unit file, and they have some very important procedures and functions that they can use together in different files. They can use the same procedures and functions, just included this unit file. So this just about multi-file layout, and you will have this task. But before, I will share my screen again. Just one more thing. We will do one task together, but not from your tasks. You see my screen. Yes, you continue to see it. So we will do some just the task from my head. So for example, we need to have the procedure or the function to output the product of the array elements. Product means multiplication. So for example, what do I mean? We have some array, just some array of elements. For example, it will be 3, 5, 1, 4, and for example 2. So it's the array elements. So it will be 0 index, it will be 1 index, 2, 3, and 4. So to have the multiplication means that we are going to have 3 times 5 times 1 times 4 and times 2. Yes, and we must do it using some function. But we are going to have this function to have it inside our unit file. And in this file, we are going to iterate over the array and to make this multiplication and to return this multiplication to our main program. But the main program will be in separated file, in different file. So let's do it. Let's do it just together with me, because I will show you how to do it. First, we are going to have to create the file, unit file, and we can call it, for example, unit product array. So it must be some meaningful name. Yes, just remember how can we have we called it. We have called it unit product array, and we must put the extension pass, because it's Pascal. Then we open this file, and we have this Pascal here. Yes, I will do it a bit bigger, just to see for you. The first line of this unit must be just unit name, and we put it like here, unit, and we must put the same name, unit product array, unit. If we have a capital letter, we must put it here also, product, and array with capital letter too, array, without any spaces between these words. Yes, we don't have the spaces, we mustn't have, because the name of the unit must be one word. And then we put semicolon. Then we have interface section. Usually, just to have it separated from different section, we put it like this, just comments, and we have interface section, just to say that we are going to have interface section. And then we must put the keyword, interface keyword, and you see it is the font is bold, yes, because it's the keywords, unit, interface also. And here usually we must put the aim of our function, what the goal of our function, and we put it like summary. If you know the web HTML, for example, you know that we call them tags, yes, summary tag. And here we must put the goal of our function. Our function goal is to return the product or multiplication of the array. Yes, so we can put it here, prints. No, not prints, because it's a function. It returns the array multiplication. Okay, and then we must to close this summary. To close it, we use this slash sign and summary again. Then we must put the head of our function. So the definition of our function. We must put function, the name of our function. Let's call it, for example, array product. Array product. And you know we have the one parameter, the array. So we need to have the array just to calculate the product of these elements. So we put here a semicolon array of integer. We must put here the type array of integer, and this function will return the multiplication of these elements. So it will return also integer type, because if we must have a product of integers, the product will be of integer type 2, integer. So it will be returned by the function. And for interface section, that's all. We don't need to put here something else, just the definition of our function and the summary of our function, what is this function going to do. And then we have implementation section. So again, we can just have some extra spaces or just some space here, and we have comments, again this line, and implementation section, implementation section. And here we must put the keyword implementation. So for compiler to understand that this section will be for implementation of our function procedures. Implementation. Okay, we see it is bold font of this word, bold. So it is the keyword. And then we must put the same definition. We can copy it, the same. It must be the same. But after this definition, we will put the body of this function. So implementation of this function. So it will start with begin keyword, and the IntelliSense has added this end. And here we must just to calculate the multiplication of this array, a array. So let's do it. We can do it using for loop or for each. For each, it is better to use here for each because we don't need to change the array's element. We just need to calculate the multiplication. We can use for each var x in our array. So array, we have a name for this array, do. So what we are going to use here, we are going to use some variable to multiply each element one by one. Yes. So how can we do it? We can use extra variable. For example, it will be var p, and the initial value must be 1 because we need to have a product multiplication. It must be 1 multiplied by the element multiplied by another element and so on. So we must start with 1 always. When we have multiplication or product, we must start with 1. And here inside this for each loop, we must multiply this p by x's. We have x, it means that it will iterate over the elements, the values of the elements of a array. Yes. So if we have array 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example, it will be 1 multiplied by 1, multiplied by 2, multiplied by 3, and so on. So p multiplied and equals to x. X means each element inside our array. And this function must return this calculation. So we must have here result variable is assigned to p. Yes. So we calculated multiplication or product, and we must return this p to our main program. Okay, if we have only this one function, so we can add here another procedures, functions, and so on. But right now we don't need it. Just we have one function. We have definition of the function in our interface, and we have implementation of our function inside implementation section. And we must put here and with dot and dot. So that's all. That's all for our unit file. Okay, we must save it. I save it, this file. And inside my folder here, I just put another file to have our task. For example, task. You can call it task 1, task 2, task 3, or it doesn't matter. Yes, it's just with task. And I want here to include this unit. So I must put here uses. It means that we're including this something. And if we put here the name of our unit, we will include this unit. Unit product with capital letter, I have it, product array. So, and here I must have my main program. So begin of my main program and end. And here, for example, we will have some array. I will do it in short version. So I will have here var a is new integer because the array of integers. And let's have 5 elements in this. And I will set these values just inside the same line. So it will be, for example, 1, 4, 3, 2, 5. So it's the values of our elements. And there are 5 of them, so it's okay. And I want to have the product, the multiplication of these numbers. So I need to call our function. And if you remember, we have the function name array product. Array product. So next line, I'm going to print out the results of this function. So the function returns something and we need to print it. Yes, print. And inside this parenthesis, we must call this function. We have it array product, the name of our function, product. And we must pass in this array. Yes. So if we run our program, the first compiler will do, it will include this unit. So it will see that we have here the function and implementation of the function. And it will include everything here. And then it will go to the line number 3. And here the definition of a array. And here we have set some numbers to this array. And it will call this function. And it is also here, yes? To this moment, this function will be here because we included it. So it understands where to find this code, this array. It understands and it sees that it must have here the same array, and it will do multiplication of the elements of this array, and it will return this multiplication to our task and will print it out. So if we run our program, we will see 120. It means that it 1 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 5. So it will be 120. Do you understand? Is it clear how to use these files and how to use the array and how to do something with the elements of this array? Now, please, I'm waiting from you some questions or some for me something to understand if it is clear for you.
I understood, but I hope I'll be able to do the same thing.
Okay. So you have these explanations in our site. Yes, I will open our site. Just